Namaskar and welcome to Sansad Television. I am Vishal Dahiya and you're watching our show Perspective, where we bring you all the details, a 360-degree holistic view of all the key issues. And today we're going to talk about Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the United States of America. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has embarked on an official visit to the United States of America from the 22nd to 25th of September. He is accompanied by a high-level delegation, including the External Affairs Minister and the National Security Advisor. The key elements of his visit are participation in the Quad Leaders Summit on 24th of September and address at the United Nations General Assembly on 25th September. Bilateral meetings with the US leadership and his Australian and Japanese counterpart and business interactions are also on the agenda. September. He is accompanied at the first in-person bilateral meeting between Prime Minister Modi and US President Joe Biden, which is going to take place on 24th of September. Both the leaders will review the robust and India-US relationship. They are also expected to discuss a range of issues, including bilateral trade and investment, defense and security collaboration, strategic clean energy partnership and reform of the multilateral system, including UN Security Council and regional security situation issues following the recent developments in Afghanistan as well. All eyes will also be on the Quad Leaders Summit. Now, at the virtual summit in March this year, the leaders had announced a broad array of initiatives, including on vaccines, infrastructure, emerging technologies and climate change. During this summit of the Quad Leaders, the leadership is expected to take stock of the progress made on these various issues, especially with respect to the COVID-19 vaccine partnership, and also identify new areas of cooperation that will benefit the Indo-Pacific region as a whole. Now, during the last leg of his US visit, Prime Minister Modi will address the United Nations General Assembly. The theme for this year's general debate at UNGA is building resilience through hope to recover from COVID-19, rebuild sustainability, respond to the needs of the planet, and respect the rights of the people, along with revitalizing United Nations. To understand all these issues, we will look at various aspects and we'll also try and answer some questions such as what are the expectations from this visit? How do India and United States of America enrich their comprehensive strategic global partnership? What are the key focus areas for Quad? And how does India plan to strengthen relationship with Australia and Japan? Also, what are the main global challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic? And to discuss this in more detail, we have with us two distinguished experts. Let me first introduce them to you, beginning with, we have with us Dr. Patrick M. Cronin, who is joining us. He is the Asia-Pacific Security Chair at Hudson Institute. We're also joined by Ambassador Navtej Sarna. He is former ambassador to United States of America. Welcome, both of you gentlemen, to Sansad Television. Let me begin with you, Ambassador Sarna, and let's first start by understanding the key highlights of the agenda. As I pointed out earlier, the itinerary and the way Prime Minister is expected to react or interact with rather the leadership there, the Quad leadership, address the United Nations General Assembly as well. But what, according to you, will be the key items in terms of the agenda items, highlighting points there?
Thank you very much. As you have already given the details, this is a multifaceted visit by the Prime Minister to the United States, and it has several different aspects. Of course, the major aspect, because that's a larger meeting, is the Quad Summit. And significantly, this will be the first in-person Quad Summit. There's only been one before, and that was virtual in March. So this will be the first time that the four leaders will actually take the Quad forward. I would guess that they would review what was set out in March, which is the three working groups. That is the one on the COVID vaccine program, the initiative in which India is supposed to produce 1 billion doses by 2022, with financing from Japan and the United States and assistance from Australia. and have it for
Dr.
the
Cronin, I'd like to
nations of the
bring you in here,
Indo-Pacific.
and we would like to understand not only from the United States perspective, but also if you look at this entire visit of Prime Minister Modi and the key engagements there. He is not only going to be there for the Quad Leaders Summit and address the UNGA, but also hold bilateral dialogue with the US leadership, as well as his Australian and Japanese counterparts there as well. So what are your expectations in terms of the key items which will be discussed, as Ambassador Sarna also pointed out?
Well, again, it's a broad agenda, and there are a lot of people for the Prime Minister to see in the United States while he's here on this important visit. But on a bilateral sort of policy level, I think helping India with counterterrorism is an issue that has not been mentioned, but still critically important, especially since the United States has withdrawn from Afghanistan and done so rather abruptly in a way that has left India on its heels to some extent. So how we will together help India and others disrupt global terror networks is a critical issue, even while we deal with the humanitarian issue. But I think, as the ambassador pointed out, vaccines and COVID-19 continue to be the global agenda on which not only US and India, but the Quad and other countries are trying to cooperate. And it's going to be important at this Quad leaders meeting on Friday at the White House to specify 6 months, how are we delivering on the vaccine doses for the world? Because this global public good is the signature project for the quadrilateral security dialogue. If we can make good and show that we're really problem solving, that these democracies are functional and cooperative for the global good, that'll go a long way towards strengthening their ability to cooperate on harder security issues as well. And it's the maritime area probably that has the most attention in the Pentagon when it comes to security cooperation with India, both bilaterally and quadrilaterally, along with Australia and Japan.
Okay. So security issues will definitely be one of the key elements of discussion there during the bilateral dialogue. Ambassador Sarna, as Dr. Cronin is pointing out, and you also referred to it, now that we're talking about first the bilateral dialogue between India and the United States, from your perspective, how do you think both countries would like to take this comprehensive global partnership to the next level or enrich it further?
Well, on the bilateral side also, this is the first time that Prime Minister Modi is meeting Mr. Biden as a president. He has met him before when Mr. Biden was vice president. So this is the first in-person meeting. Now that's important. We have a very wide-ranging relationship. There's a defense and security aspects which will be discussed. There is the counterterrorism, as Mr. Cronin mentioned, and that's very important for us, particularly in the wake of what has happened in the region in Afghanistan, and the possibility of Afghanistan becoming a hotbed of terrorism and an exporter of forces inimical to India. I think the United States and India have a lot to discuss. But besides these security-related issues, there are other aspects. There is a wide-ranging relationship which covers health issues, which covers energy issues in the light of COP26 coming up, and which covers so many other aspects, including the people-to-people relations and the movement issue. So I think there's a wide agenda on the bilateral side, which will be discussed and seen how we can take forward. It's important here, this first meeting, because this sets a doubt that the India-US relationship has suffered any letdown with the change in administration in Washington, D.C. This shows that the U.S. is very much engaged with India, and the U.S. is very much engaged in the Indo-Pacific.
Okay. Now, since you mentioned the Indo-Pacific, there's one more aspect before we move on to Quad, and Mr. Sarna, I'd like to start with you. Vis-a-vis the bilateral talks or bilateral discussions or cooperation with not only United States, but also Australia and Japan in the backdrop of the recently launched, this Trilateral Partnership AUKUS between Australia, United Kingdom, and United States of America as well.
Well, I think as far as India is concerned, the effort will be to keep the two things separate. I mean, the AUKUS is not something that India is involved in, and it's between three other countries, and it's purely a security alliance. The Quad, on the other hand, is something which four countries have put together, which is more a kind of a values-oriented and a worldview-oriented grouping. I won't even call it an organization. It's not a treaty alliance, and it looks at a wide-ranging set of issues which cover health, which cover technology, which cover climate change, connectivity, infrastructure, and of course, maritime security. So I think our effort will be to make sure that the two things are not mixed up. And I'm sure that the other partners will also have this sensitivity. Of course, it will be a good time to get a briefing from both the United States and Australia on what they think that the AUKUS will holds forth for the Indo-Pacific. Of course, there is a common thing in both things, and which is the fact that they have come together essentially, although we don't always say it, essentially because of the aggressive attitudes of China in the Indo-Pacific and its efforts to upend the international law and prevailing systems in the Indo-Pacific. So in some ways, both these developments are a response to that.
Okay.
But then they cover different areas, they are different partnerships, and they are different in nature.
Okay. Dr. Cronin, let's come to the Quad Leaders Summit, and this will be the first in-person summit of the Quad leadership. Now, there have been key issues which were identified, and the ball was set rolling vis-a-vis those issues in the first summit meeting, which was held virtually. From your point of view, how do you think the Quad leadership would want to move from here onwards? And what exactly are the tangible, achievable aspects of the Quad partnership?
I think the ambassador spoke very well about how the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue is not a treaty organization, not an alliance. It is an ad hoc multilateralism, trying to problem solve over specific functional challenges. And at the virtual leaders meeting in March, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic was issue number one. And so the functional deliverable on that is to announce progress on a plan of action for distributing vaccines, 1 billion vaccines over the next 6 months or so, to help the world fight COVID-19. I also think there's a common thread that runs, though, through this ad hoc multilateralism of the Quad and more robust security arrangements throughout the Indo-Pacific, whether it's AUKUS or the U.S.-Australian alliance or the U.S.-Japan alliance or Malabar exercises for that matter. And that has to do with research and development. It has to do with technology. So whether we're talking about clean energy or whether we're talking about combating COVID-19 or whether we're talking about supply chain security, the United States and India, along with Japan and Australia, have a deep and abiding interest in being the leaders of the future of high technology. So one of the aspects of AUKUS, this Australian, UK, US arrangement that's completely different from the Quad on the one hand, but it is possibly demonstrated a path in which the quadrilateral countries can become a more confederated industrial base for research and development, can be mutually reinforcing. And that's not yet a specific deliverable, but I wouldn't be surprised if there are some announcements out of the White House about R&D, research and development cooperation among these four countries.
Okay. And Mr. Sinha, from your perspective, when we are looking at Quad, and you pointed out clearly the difference between this arrangement and the Trilateral Pact. Obviously, that is more security focused, and this is more development focused. But what exactly do you think might be the key takeaways or key focus areas of this Quad Leaders Summit? Specifically when we are looking at Indo-Pacific region, because that is where the Quad focus is.
I think, as it has been mentioned before, I would believe that this summit would like to focus on the areas on which there is an agreement to focus on. And one of these, as has been mentioned, is the COVID program. But I think in a broader set of terms, there will be an attempt to put together a common path on how we are going to move ahead in some areas like connectivity projects, like infrastructure projects, and the financing of these. That's been a key issue because the Quad also wants to make sure that it offers an alternative paradigm to Southeast Asian nations than the debt traps that China sets forth for these countries. So there will be, there's a broad thing of keeping a free and open Indo-Pacific, but then there are specific concrete projects. There is connectivity, there is infrastructure, there is clean energy and climate. So I think it's important for the Quad to move this agenda forward in real terms. It cannot happen dramatically. It cannot happen overnight. Mm-hmm. It has to keep the comfort level of all the four countries together. So I think, we will see further direction since this is a first in-person meeting made in the March meeting. There is a joint statement. There is a joint op-ed by the four leaders. And I think you will see a development in the same direction.
Okay. Now that you mentioned, and the underlying theme, obviously, when we're talking about the global issues is the COVID pandemic, the challenges being posed by this particular pandemic. That seemingly is the theme of the UNGA debate as well, where Prime Minister Modi will address, deliver that address on 25th. So from that perspective, there are quite a lot of similarities, and there's a common thread when we're talking about what needs to be done and what needs to be the key focus areas vis-a-vis the global leadership.
Yes, I'm happy to expand on that. I think you're absolutely right. That is the theme of the UNGA debate. It's a very wide-ranging theme. It takes in everything under the sun. But I think it just shows how hard the international community has been hit by the COVID pandemic. The economies are in trouble. The health systems are in trouble. Political cooperation is in trouble, and it's the entire world in a way is in a flux. So we have to take this forward. I think the UNGA by definition is broad statements. You're not going to get concrete agreement on anything. You're not going to get concrete programs out of it. But I think these are going to be sort of large painting the canvas statements by different world leaders. Some of them will focus on sustainability, some will work on the economy, some will focus on the health, some will focus on all these things put together. And that's what the UNGA is all about, but I'm sure Dr. Cronin may like to add to this. Yes.
Okay, definitely. And there's a global COVID summit as well, which has been hosted by President Joe Biden there. Dr. Cronin, going back to the UNGA debate and the elaborate theme, as Mr. Sarna was pointing out, what are your expectations in terms of the work which needs to be done from here onwards vis-a-vis tackling the challenges being posed by the COVID pandemic?
Well, President Biden has talked about being the arsenal of vaccines, and that's what we need to deliver on. So whether it's making sure that manufacturing is distributed throughout the world, and that we're allowed to support India and Japan and Australia and other countries around the world who can help not only produce the vaccines, as India does so well, but also distribute it and finance the distribution and the delivery. Shots in arms around the world. So when I read about friends in Southeast Asia who are still woefully under-vaccinated, we have to do a better job. We have to start to double down on distributing vaccine to help the world try to get around this pandemic. This 20 months into this global pandemic, and it's still very much taxing the global economy and so many people and taking many people's lives. So over the next 6 months or year, I hope by the next UNGA, a year from now, we'll be able to stand up and say the world has essentially put the pandemic back in the box it came from, because the vaccines will be the answer. Health care and distribution of goods for delivering vaccines will be the answer ultimately here in the next year.
Okay. So that's about COVID pandemic, and that indeed is an overlapping issue when we're talking about either the UNGA or the Quad Leaders Summit, or even during the bilateral summits which will take place between the top leadership there. But one key aspect and one aspect of that UNGA theme I'd like to pick up, and I'd like to start with you, Dr. Cronin, and that is the last part of that theme, revitalizing United Nations. Here we are talking about the reform process as well, which has been debated endlessly and also is a key concern which has been always raised by India.
The Biden administration is committed to bringing India into a permanent status of the UN Security Council, but we know that there are obstacles to this, and we'll keep fighting. But the United Nations system, whether it's the Security Council or the General Assembly or the various international bodies like the World Health Organization, are critical for supporting global order, and that's a good thing. But we also know from the quadrilateral ad hoc multilateralism or from other many-lateral agreements, including the Australia-US-UK pact, that sometimes smaller groups of countries with a common purpose, willing to commit extra effort to make things happen, that's essential for getting things done. So we need all of the above, right? We need the multilateral institutions of the United Nations to be strong and vibrant. And I think President Biden is committed to the United States shoring up the United Nations system. At the same time, it's not sufficient. We still need strong bilateral relations. We need many lateral relations and regional bodies as well. So it is all of the above to try to manage all of the problems we've talked about on this program and many others that we haven't.
Okay. And Mr. Sinha, would you agree with those points which has been made by Dr. Cronin, but also from your point of view and from India's point of view as well? We all know that we've been pushing forward this issue that there is an urgent need for reforms, not only in the United Nations, but also all multilateral bodies, world bodies there.
Yes, I think I would agree with what in this, reformed multilateralism is a major agenda item of Indian diplomacy in recent years. And I think there is a scope for that, a huge amount of scope for that. And somehow, again, coming back to COVID-19, this need has been underlined by the world's experience during the pandemic. So it's not only the UN Security Council that needs a reform, but several other aspects of the United Nations system, whether they're dealing with social and economic issues, whether they're dealing with health issues, whether they're dealing with trade issues. I think there is a need to bring them up to date. There is a need to reform these. It's a call of our times, and I'm sure that we'll hear much about that in the UNGA debate.
Okay. Mr. Sinha, one last question before we bring this discussion to an end, and that's about some other key events during the Prime Minister's visit to the United States, and one of them obviously is his interaction with the CEOs. Trade and industry bodies are really important, and not only from a bilateral perspective, but also from a global economic perspective as well. And India has a lot to offer there.
Yes, I think the US-India trade and economic relationship is a very important aspect of our strategic partnership. The trade is about $140 billion today, and has tremendous scope. I mean, we can increase that threefold if we like. There is a need for more investment into India from the US, and that will be a theme, I'm sure, of the conversations that take place with the Prime Minister, with select CEOs. We don't have a list yet, but I believe that that's in the works. Mm-hmm. And there are issues, the trade relationship, which came up during the Trump administration, but still haven't gone away. There are issues of market access, there are issues of data localization, and there are several other issues which have come up, which need to be resolved, which need to be moved out. For instance, India's GSP India was taken off the GSP benefits during the Trump administration. Okay. There was a sort of tariff imposition on different things, and these are things which need a quick resolution so that the relationship can move ahead and actualize the full potential that we have of working together.
Okay. So indeed, there are challenges, but there are ways to resolve those challenges as well. Thank you so much, Mr. Navtesh Sarna and Dr. Patrick Cronin, for your views and insights on this very important and key visit of Prime Minister Modi to the United States of America, wherein we will see a lot of key events taking place. Not only the bilateral, summits or bilateral dialogue between India and United States and India and Australia and Japan as well. But in addition to that, there will be Quad Leaders Summit, and Prime Minister Modi is also going to address the UNGA session out there on the last day, that is on 25th. We'll keep on bringing you all the details and inputs and bring in finer points through the holistic debate in our show Perspective. Keep watching Sansad Television. Thank you.